Hello everyone, this is Mike from Windows8Forums.com. As I previously announced in our series of videos looking at the alpha and finally the installation of the consumer preview build of Windows 8, we're going to take a look at Windows 8 features in a little bit more detail. And to start that off, we're currently in the Metro UI here. I'd like to talk a little bit with you about this release, the Windows 8 Consumer Preview, its limitations, what people were expecting and what they received, as well as what we can expect for the final release of this operating system. Windows 8 Consumer Preview brings about a new world in software and hardware development. It's not just a Microsoft world. Software companies, game studios, and all sorts of information technology companies depend on the reliability and performance of Microsoft products and services, even when their customers aren't in Microsoft Windows. Today, however, this video is taking place within the new Microsoft Windows 8 Consumer Preview platform. But whenever an email passes through an Exchange server or a large database is designed for interoperability between a metadata retrieval system and Microsoft Access, companies that specialize in document management, database administration, and even brand marketing will reap massive benefits from an interactive desktop that contains a display mechanism that has the potential to plot and chart raw data into something visually understandable. When we look at the Metro UI, we're looking at a totally different user interface for the Microsoft Windows operating system. For example, if I click on Weather here, I'm getting an app preview, and I'm going to turn on location awareness. And I'm going to get the weather for someplace in New Jersey. Unfortunately, this isn't exactly where I live, and I'm not using the Microsoft Connected account, but I can change that very easily. I right-click here. I can go to World Weather, and I can see the weather for everywhere in the world. Matter of fact, this is more close to where I am, and we see New York. We can see some trends here. This is just one application that is a Metro app. These applications are written in Windows RT, which is the Windows runtime programming. And these applications will be native to the platform. Now, currently, there's a lot of shortcuts that need to be used, and these shortcuts come in the terms of hotkeys with the keyboard in order to navigate around. For example, I'm going to want to find a way to close this application, but the only way I really know how to do it, the back button doesn't work, so I'll have to hit F4. And if F4 doesn't work, I'm going to have to do something else, and that would be something like Control-Alt-Delete. And we'll go to Task Manager here and see if that switches us out. Yeah. So we're back on the desktop here, and a lot of the Metro apps in the Consumer Preview throw you back to the desktop. Basically, the desktop is starting to look more and more like a legacy feature. And when you look at the desktop, you'll see that, the Start menu is gone. And that's been a big deal for a lot of people who wish that the Start menu was still there. However, the Start menu has been replaced by the Metro UI. Now, currently, I'm in a local account that has no connectivity or interactivity with Microsoft Live services. I can change that very easily by going back into Metro. I start using my keyboard and I can search on anything. So I'm going to search on User. Oh, that doesn't work. I'll go to Control Panel here, and I'll get back to our old Control Panel. I'm going to go to User Accounts. I'm going to go to the mic account, and I'm going to make changes to my account in PC settings. Now, this is where I can switch over to a local account or a Microsoft account. I'm going to switch over to a Microsoft account right here. I'm going to enter my email address. Please don't email me there. And I'm going to enter my password for this account. Okay, there we go. And we're going to finish that operation, and this account's being prepared again. And suddenly, we're now switched into a whole new realm here. But let's look at PC settings to start us off. We can go to Personalize. We have a Start screen. We can change some of the information the start screen. Right now we have some basic generic backgrounds and colors. And I'm assuming that that's going to change once the operating system is released. If not, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. We have a lock screen here. We can change the lock screen to whatever we want it to look like. So whenever we lock the desktop, we're going to have a different looking picture here. And some of these may be placeholders right now. We can also put a number of applications within the lock screen. So when the computer is inaccessible because you need to enter a password, you'll be able to use some applications that you want. And this can be calendar, messaging, mail. You can also add eventually weather and things like that in this area. These applications are secure and they don't usually require interaction without a password. We also see an account picture. We can use our webcam to set an account picture, or we can browse for custom built pictures or pictures that are in our account right now. Right now, we don't really have anything to find here. And this is sort of where we get lost in Metro again, unfortunately. Going backwards is not exactly that easy with a mouse and keyboard. And we're going to hit F4 and see if that takes us back. Nope, it doesn't. We're going to try to Alt-Tab, and Alt-Tab will do the trick. So let's see, where are we? What do we want to do now is go ahead and log out here. The way we're going to log out of the desktop is going back to the Start menu again. And we want to try to get the snap feature working here. As you can see, once you hit the right-hand corner of the screen, you get a number of features here. One of those features is settings. And if we click on settings here, we'll say, okay, we can show administrative tools. That seems to be the only settings for Metro right now that are available. And this is not dissimilar to what you would see under administrative tools under the real Start menu in Windows 7 or even in Windows Server. In fact, Windows Server 8 will sort of look a lot like this, with, of course, more features for Active Directory, group policy, and so forth. We also have what used to be our little taskbar now being pushed down here. And we're seeing things like volume, network status, notifications, language, monitor settings, apparently, where you'd be able to control the brightness of the display, and some other stuff here. And if you notice, there is some capability to navigate around here, and you can see what's open. You can snap things here. It's presumably using this charms feature that we hear a lot about. And what we're going to do right now, at the very least, is get out of here. And we're going to check out more settings real quick. So we're logged in with a Microsoft account. The settings won't sync between the PCs we use if we switch to a local account. And we have notifications here. We can receive notifications from these following applications. And as more apps are developed for this platform, much like you would see on a phone, you'll have more notification availability for you. In fact, if you're familiar with Facebook, or if you're familiar with Android devices, or even Windows Phone, it's not a coincidence that the system is starting to look much like that. In fact, it's being sort of geared towards that. We have the search functionality here, what apps are going to be used for the search. We have sharing here. Things are pretty much streamlined in terms of usability. Reset your PC and start over. Now, this is an interesting feature here. If you want to recycle your PC or start over with it, you can reset it and remove everything. This is a new factory restore setting that's just been introduced into Windows 8, and this will bring your Windows installation back to basics. This is something that we've only really seen coming out of manufacturers like Hewlett-Packard, Dell, Lenovo, previously IBM, Gateway. We're starting to see this now within Windows as a feature within Microsoft Windows. And you'll be able to use this sort of as a way to go back to factory defaults, something that we would usually purchase a backup system for. It remains to be seen how reliable this feature is when confronted with viruses, malware, trojans, and other security threats. But that's something that will be heavily emphasized, undoubtedly, and touted with this new operating system. It's certainly a great feature for information technology technicians, for system preppers, and so forth. So this is something that we're going to see. And we're going to want to know how this feature is used specifically by manufacturers. For example, you may want to reset your PC to factory defaults, but you may always wind up with the same factory default settings from a company, for example, like Dell or HP, who may choose to install third-party applications with the factory install image. So this is going to be an interesting area to look at in the future. We also have privacy settings here, and as you can see here, we have some settings letting apps use our location, letting apps use your name and account picture, help improve the Windows Store by sending URLs for the web content that apps use. So the privacy features are pretty streamlined here. Expect this to get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more decisive in the final release version, at least I would hope, if only because the on-off switches here are for 3 different options. And when it comes to privacy, I have a feeling people will hope for a little bit more in this area. Now, if you go to devices, you'll see what you have here. This is basically a kind of simplified version of what was Device Manager, or the device management console in Microsoft Windows. This is sort of a simplified setup of this. We see some hardware that's been installed here, as well as the Microsoft XPS document writer. And we see a setting here for metered internet connections. Now, this is presumably for tablets and devices that are using air cards or cell phone networks. And we can set up a metered internet connection, but it's not really shown here how this exactly works. Turn this off to help prevent extra charges. We don't see any settings about how the connection is metered. Hopefully this doesn't catch on with cable and DSL providers, because at least here in the United States and most of the rest of the world, internet connections aren't metered. It's only on cell phone networks that they are. Let's look at ease of access. We can set a high contrast mode. Everything's going to look funky. This has been set up for people with disabilities. It's been included since the earliest versions of Windows. In some cases, it used to be a theme, and now it's actually just a high contrast setting. Make everything on the screen bigger. Well, there you go. Tab through web pages and apps using caret browsing. This was formerly a feature in Internet Explorer, but with the advent of HTML, JavaScript being incorporated in applications, caret browsing now starts to become something that needs to be incorporated into applications as well. Now we have a very interesting option called Sync Your Settings. With Sync Your Settings, you're going to be able to sync the settings on this PC, and you're going to be able to carry those over to other computers using your Microsoft account. Now, what does this mean exactly? Well, when you sign up and you set up your system, if you watched the previous video about how to set up Microsoft Windows 8 Consumer Preview, you would have seen that you can create a Windows Live account and use that to connect into Microsoft Windows. This is similar to roaming profiles with Windows Server. When you were connected in with a Windows Server in a business environment, if your business had set up roaming profiles on your network, you were able to carry over settings from computer to computer. It was never really perfected very well, but with Windows 8, at least with the consumer preview, it looks like a lot of work has gone into making this a possibility to be done through the live account itself. So if you wanted to connect to someone else's computer at their apartment, for instance, or their home, you may be able to connect in with your live account, and carry over the features from your applications over to any number of devices or computers. So how far this will go will be very interesting. But thus far, you can control whether or not settings are synced on this PC universally and globally through this single on and off switch. In fact, the emphasis on and off buttons as opposed to check boxes or radio boxes or even drop downs is very prominent here, and this has a lot to do with the touchscreen compatibility. And of course, we have the home group availability. As you can see, there's a home group in Windows 7, and it looks like, at least with the consumer preview, there will be some backwards compatibility for home groups. Again, home groups are sort of a replacement to the original Windows work groups, except they have password protection and allow you to share files across a network in a more secure way when you don't have a Windows Home Server or Windows Server 2008, or in the future, Windows Server 8. Now, this is Windows Update, and we're set to automatically install updates, and we can check for updates here. And we go to check for updates, and you'll see that Windows Update continues to be integrated into the operating system. However, it looks a bit more touchscreen friendly here with this sort of, light gray on white interface, like it's a big web page, like the whole operating system's a big web page. All right, so we look at this and we see what important updates available, and this is an update for Windows Defender. We'll go ahead and install that update. We'll see that the installation takes place. Nothing new here. We have that in Windows 7. Voila, that can go through, and we can go ahead and do everything else while that's taking place. Oh, and for Windows Defender updates, at least in the consumer preview, we need to restart the operating system in order to make that a possibility. We'll go ahead and do that later. Or never. Let's check out Metro. And we're going back here by hitting the Windows key on our operating system. And of course, this takes place, again, we must remember that this takes the place of our start menu. When we right click on an empty area of the Metro UI, we get this little thing on the bottom of the screen called All Apps. This lets us browse all applications on the system. This includes photos, people, Xbox Companion, Xbox Live. To link up with the Xbox apps, we actually have to turn our Xbox on. And that'll give us some information about how to link our Xbox and control it from the Windows PC, which is actually pretty novel feature for gamers who are into console games. The Xbox 720 is rumored to be coming out soon. The 360 is a bit under the weather in terms of its performance capabilities compared to a Sandy Bridge processor with a brand new AMD Radeon 7000 series card. But the console market is huge. For years, Microsoft went ahead and undercut the sales of its console systems in order to try to dominate that market. And they did so without Blu-ray compatibility on their system. They did so without wireless compatibility on their system, which PlayStation 3 had from the outset. And eventually, as the prices came down, Microsoft decided to include those features in their newest revision of the Xbox, which includes finally, wireless capability as well as Blu-ray capability. Now, we'll see some familiar things. Here's Windows Defender, but we also have something coming up called Windows Defender Offline, and we're getting ready for the integration of what's going to actually be basically Microsoft Security Essentials built into this thing, and we'll have an offline utility for the security of this system. How much resource intensive this will be is something currently unknown. We cannot benchmark this system, though there have been attempts by myself to do so, even on a virtual machine. It would be unwise to benchmark the system this early. The operating system is rumored to be coming out around October at the end of the year, but there is much to be done here, and that becomes very clear when we start looking at what's going on here. So right now I'm just launching into Solitaire, And you'll see the graphics have been improved quite a bit. We can sign into Xbox Live with Solitaire, and presumably we'll be able to play, well, we won't be able to play Solitaire with other people, but we will be able to compare our scores, most likely, with other people. And it's likely that some people will come out with some additional card games. But if you ask me, the true test of this operating system and the true test for many operating systems is going to be whether or not the operating system is greater than the sum of its parts. I don't believe, from my opinion, that Windows Vista was an operating system that was greater than the sum of its parts. It was flawed, but Windows 7 certainly was greater than the sum of its parts. When we looked at all of the improvements in Windows that came with Windows 7, we could see that it was a performance mothership for gamers, for productivity, for office environments. This was the system that resolved all of the problems with Windows Vista and got rid of all of the major issues that we saw with Windows XP. Windows 8, on the other hand, is an operating system that's introducing new features. And those new features are going to have a learning curve to them. They're going to be difficult for people to accept at first. And that's something that we need to look at very carefully, because whether or not people will be willing to adopt this new sort of system is something that we don't know yet. We don't know what the benchmarks are going to be for startup. We've looked at some preliminary ones. We don't know what the benchmarks will be for battery life, for performance, but knowing Microsoft, they may throw us a big surprise, and the operating system may actually become much, much faster than it was previously. So looking at this here now, we see a Metro UI system that's tied in primarily to the desktop. But the desktop eventually will be phased out. It's not likely to appear on Windows phones, for example, or other areas like tablets where Windows 8 will be installed on ARM devices. But it could be, but it's very unlikely. But right now, we're still very much dependent on the desktop. Not much has changed in that area. For those of us who know what we're doing, we're still pulling up things using the good old run command. Some things have changed if you look here. Well, some things haven't. We can look at the services here, and you see that a lot of them are stopped. This is because I believe Windows 8 does introduce something, and you'll see that even the touchscreen support is stopped because we don't have a touchscreen computer on here, I believe. Windows 8 has a feature called Start on Demand, and hopefully that also includes a Stop on Demand feature. For example, by default, we see that parental controls are turned off, the Windows Media Player network sharing service is stopped, even the biometric services are stopped, Windows Time is stopped, volume shadow copy is stopped. It's suspected, though, that these things will turn on when they are requested. Second log on is turned off. And we know that that is something that has to do very much with roaming profiles and so forth, and of course multiple accounts on one machine. When we look at Windows Backup, that is stopped, and we only have a few running services here. Now that's very much to the credit of Windows 8, which thus far is not using up that much memory. It's using up 1.2 gigabytes of RAM. Barely using any processor with 4 cores available to it. It is moving around with the Ethernet access here and the LAN usage, and that's a little bit of a concern. We see this activity going on. It's coming from the Weather app and Internet Explorer. We're not really doing anything here with these things, but you know they're updating obviously. When we look at the Task Manager improvements, we certainly see a lot, not as good as Process Monitor whatsoever. If you know anything about Process Monitor, or look up the video that Joe Stackhouse and I did on Process Monitor quite a while ago, which included information about how to stop malware and so forth, that's a much more detailed system. But we do see a lot of data here, and we can delete usage history as well. What we do see most of all, surprisingly, is Ethernet usage in the terms of kilobits per second. And if we open up Resource Monitor, we'll see that not much has changed here since Windows 7. Now, if you've been monitoring my previous videos on Microsoft Windows 8 Consumer Preview and the builds that leaked prior to that, you will have remembered my frustration and my complete surprise in the fact that the Start menu was gone. I really didn't know how to navigate the system. And I have, half a dozen certifications in information technology. I worked in the public sector and the private sector for many years, and I've been using computers since I was a kid. I'm 29 years old today. There's many of you out there who are watching this video who are going to be much older than myself. Not too much older. I don't want to insult you in that way. There's going to be a lot of kids out there that are a lot younger than I am. I remember when I first used the Commodore Amiga, and we had to use Kickstart and Workbench just to get the system started. So there's always going to be a learning curve. And if Windows 8 is going to be a revolutionary type of operating system, maybe this is what it needs. Maybe we all need a kick in the head or something. But I did discuss, in some instances, a negativity bias that does exist. If you first run beta software, and if you're inexperienced with running it, you may think that the whole operating system is a big chunk of bugs that you find. And it's in many cases unbranded, unready for commercial release. And you're going to be, cognitively speaking, 2.5 times more likely to remember the negative experiences that you have than you are to remember the positive ones. And this is all around for everyone, scientifically supported study, that you're going to have this cognitive dissonance of like, hey, what's going on here? I'm supposed to benefit from this and I'm not. Well, the fact is nothing is done here. This is all just in beta. You're seeing a lot of advertisements for different things here. And this is a concern that I had about the commercialization of the desktop. And you see these placeholders for ads, Toyota and Windows Phone and so forth. And there is, I believe that there is a legitimate place for concern in these areas. And you have an area to place feedback in many areas of the operating system. And this is something that I need to use a bit more, rather than posting on various forum sites. But you'll see, for example, you can buy TV shows and stuff like this and TV series. Well, my question was, what happens if you already have something like Netflix? Will you have to buy the content from a Microsoft system only? Is this a grab at that type of market? Is it a grab at the internet advertising market? And I spoke about that quite a bit and wrote about it in a recent article about the commercialization of the desktop. It's very hard to navigate, mind you, so please excuse me while I bumble back and forth here still to this very day. But when you go into something like video, you'll see, oh, well, yeah, there's sort of these ads for me to go ahead and buy stuff. And then when you go, obviously, to people, well, this is something I had set up before. And this is my old friend Ross Cameron. He's a Microsoft MVP, fellow enthusiast. And we have a lot of people here. Half of them, I don't know who the hell they are, if you don't mind the language. I think that's the case with everyone's contact list, unless you're super diligent about it. I don't use Windows Live primarily for my contacts, but I still have a million people on there. And of course, you see that people are connected to my contact list from every possible service, Twitter, Google, Exchange, so forth. And I don't want to release anyone's email address here. The thing is, when I go to what's new, I start seeing messages from Facebook, from Twitter, from all over the place, primarily from Facebook, because I've allowed stuff to get put into Windows Live and go into the People app. And so Facebook, for me, is now, in fact, an application written by Microsoft that's integrated into the operating system as a Microsoft application. And so this has an overwhelmingly alarming type of situation. Now, it's been done with, it's been done with phones, and that's one thing. But to have it integrated into every computer system in the world, I do think raises some concern about your stuff and who's going to be looking at it, who's going to have control of it. Why should a site like Facebook continue, for instance, if all of their stuff is being just placed into Microsoft Windows? Why should they even have developed this service if it's going to be part of Windows? And will they benefit in any way from that association or affiliation? So this is a question that I had when looking at the People app, because I noticed that Windows Live had suddenly become a Facebook clone of sorts. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean it in a way that's quite literal. As someone that uses Facebook to communicate with friends, it sort of just took everything from Facebook, took everything from Twitter, and integrated it into this application, which is pretty neat if you're using a phone. We're familiar with that with Google. We download apps from Facebook. We download apps from Twitter. And here, though, we have a Microsoft-written app for this purpose. And that's a bit concerning, because if you can control the presentation of information, you can also control the content. And if you can control the content, you can control the advertising. And if you can control the advertising on the internet, you can control the search. And if you can control the search, well, then you can control what people read and the information that they can find. So it's a legitimate concern to have all of my information linked into this one thing. But maybe I'm just an old timer by today's standards, and maybe I'm just not getting it. We have a reader here, and presumably these are for files and documents. The Reader app is dead for me because I don't have any PDF or XPS docs here. And we have a financial application preview. Of course, I think we're going to see the Microsoft. Oh, no, we have Dow Jones Industrial Average here. We didn't get MSFT coming up first. We see some stock information here, and we can, of course, add a watch list. We can go to news, rates, best of the web. Let's go back to that People app one more time, and let's right-click on it, and we can go to new. And then we can add another account. I mean, it just never ends. New contacts, and it could be a good feature. Maybe I'm just not used to it yet. Now, here's one thing that I really do like, and this is, again, the cloud storage, the cloud file storage area. This is another area where a grab is sort of taking place, and this is with SkyDrive. If we go to SkyDrive, we can store files over the internet, and we can access them from within the operating system now, and that's very sort of good. Let's see how we would add a file. Well, things are not exactly too snappy right now, and I'm using a mouse and keyboard, not a touchscreen again. And I'd be more likely to use SkyDrive within the Windows desktop environment. And I wonder what that means if we see SkyDrive on here by default. I wonder what that means for something like Dropbox, which is sort of a competitor to SkyDrive, sort of does the same thing. I guess they have to develop a Metro app now too, and of course they wouldn't have access to all of the APIs. At least I don't think so. I could be wrong about that. I'm not a programmer, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have access to the Windows 8 kernel to optimize it to be as fast as the Microsoft applications. And that's just an honest thing that people have talked about for years. And if you don't talk about that sort of thing, I think you're sort of being intellectually dishonest with yourself. But again, we see the administrative tools features. This was once just a folder within the start menu. It is now a bunch of buttons, and we can, of course, move them around and organize things whatever way we want. That's something that we don't talk about a lot. for example. I can create a whole new little column there. And it's almost, in a way, if you've ever done any DBA stuff, it sort of reminds you of a Excel spreadsheet or an interactive, well, hopefully one day like database content would be interactive in this way, sort of like the operating system from Jurassic Park. I think that was a Mac though. Okay, so if I go to camera here, what's that going to do? That's going to launch my webcam, and you might see me here. Let me make sure that I'm shaved and so forth. No, the camera's not working for me, unfortunately. If I go to messaging, that's going to launch me right into Windows Messenger. Let's see if I right click again. What's my status? I'm online. Doesn't appear. Not sure what I can do here. I don't see my friends. Now I see my latest Facebook updates. I go back to the People app. So there's cross communication between different apps, or maybe this is the same app, but it's got two different buttons or something. I'm not really sure here. Turn live tile off, uninstall, unpin from start. And we can, of course, check off these apps. We can make them larger or smaller. And this is pretty much it. Now, there was some talk about this, and I was thinking in terms of a public release of Microsoft Windows 8 that will appear. This is essentially a beta. It's important to remember that. Presumably, it's near the release candidate stage. Some features are likely completely omitted or broken, but not all is lost for Windows 8. There are some under-the-hood changes that show promise. I am not a Windows developer or programmer. Most of my tinkering involves Linux, C, HTML, PHP, and JavaScript, but I can start to appreciate the level of changes that are being made on a core level as I get more time to become acquainted with this system and allow various white papers and documents to enter my lexicon. So the more I learn, the more I understand about this system, the more I will either like it or completely despise it. In this case, I'm neutral. I'm starting to like it. You'll see in my other videos and in many of the comments I made prior that I was not too excited about the system. Those looking to upgrade or who will receive the upgrade already as part of a plan, like Microsoft Volume License Key Software Assurance members, will reap some benefits by making the upgrade to Windows 8 early. Businesses that have been around for long enough will be familiar with creating and following comprehensive end-of-life cycle plans. Such plans are usually coordinated between an enterprise administrative team that manages the day-to-day changes of internal certificate authorities, domain controllers, and mail servers. This group usually and hopefully has the training and forethought necessary to look at the official Microsoft release timetable, as well as the support for commonly used hardware and software. Assessments can be made to better understand how, when, where, and why this software and hardware is deployed and under what conditions it is upgraded or phased out of entirely. Not only does this help this level of planning bring clarity to what could otherwise become a source of enormous administrative overhead, but it also helps to mitigate the risks associated with allowing systems to continue running under the radar and without proper security auditing. Under such a scenario, businesses may choose to have their internal IT department perform network-wide audits of all systems. It is an affordable alternative to bringing in an outside specialist, and comparisons with Microsoft's official support timetable can help make the transition to new hardware and software, as well as what comes with that, such as training and significant infrastructure investment, a more conceivable possibility. Home users can depend on a much more simple approach, and that is to monitor requirements needed for tasks like school, work, home, and entertainment, keeping up to date with Microsoft's in-band and out-of-band security updates. As mentioned previously, Microsoft already publishes a roadmap to indicate when mainstream support and even updates will be terminated for their operating systems. Combining all of these ideas together, it is not unreasonable to come to a conclusion that one can continue using Windows 7 for a few more years without much difficulty. When the time comes, an upgrade will be made easy, as the large system manufacturers and independent system builders will no doubt rise to the occasion once again and bundle OEM copies of the system after the release to manufacturer date. On the side, one could begin to upgrade a small office or a home network with new computers when the need arises, in order to take advantage of the new feature set that is sure to be setting a precedent going forward. Very large enterprise networks usually already make use of proprietary custom software and hardware. Those businesses can begin the transition planning in phases and will likely have access to fully licensed Microsoft support personnel and salespeople who work in the corporate sales division of the company. Those resources can be accessed by standard enterprises, which are approximately 200 client systems, and mid-range offices, which include 50 to 200 client systems. Even a few well-trained and certified IT consultants and managers could handle a migration and post-migration scenario with the right level of planning and funding. Stay positive. There is deductive reasoning as to why not all is lost. Virtualization does score a win for Microsoft Windows 8. It will allow you to take your computing experience to the next level. If you are not entirely enticed by the prospect of running Windows 8, or still have a codependent relationship with legacy applications, Hyper-V will be sure to help you in that area, much like Microsoft Virtual PC brought Windows XP onto the desktop for many Windows 7 users. In fact, it's important to note that I'm using a hypervisor sort of thing right now. I'm using VMware Workstation to show you this operating system. The user interface here will not be alien to anyone who is old enough to remember Microsoft Encarta, or to anyone who has already owned a Windows phone. I still remember using Microsoft Encarta's slick navigational system to look up John F. Kennedy's 1961 inaugural address. This was one of the first times I saw decent footage in an encyclopedia. Back in those days, everyone was on dial-up, and an encyclopedia like Encarta was the be-all and end-all of factoid finding for non-academics and kids still in grade school. So expect Metro-powered applications programmed in C++, C, Major, HTML, JavaScript, and even Visual Basic. This programming platform, dubbed Windows Runtime or Windows RT for short, is object-oriented and just getting started. With enough knowledge of HTML, JavaScript, and other platforms, many people out there will be able to create Metro applications with the Windows Store with limited knowledge. Let's take a look, for example, at the store. What's going on here in Windows Store? Well, looks like there's some things on sale, but mostly, for now, we got some stuff that's provided for free. We've got Kindle for free. We've got iCookbook. Trying to move over the desktop here. Let's go to games and see what we've got. We've got a whole bunch of free games here. Presumably, this will attempt to replace Steam, probably in some way. Microsoft Games for Windows. You got music and videos, news and weather. You got the whole internet built into one operating system. And I did say, quite cynically a while ago, it did remind me of America Online. That's just my opinion right now. We have to see how it turns out. I have to keep remembering it's a beta. But I'd like to see what your response is. Windows8forums.com is a site for people of all skill levels. Like I said, I've worked in IT for a long time, and not as long as many of you, and certainly a lot longer than a lot of you. To my knowledge, I see a lot of outbound TCP connections here, inbound, outbound activity going on. I sort of see an overhaul, Service Pack 2 of Windows 7 here with a fancy interface that wants to integrate and compete with Facebook, with iOS, compete with the mobile marketplace. But I'd like to see what you people think about this, and you can respond to this video directly, or you can go to Windows8forums.com. This was a long-winded video. It's sort of a basic primer on Windows 8 thus far. Nothing too technical here yet. I'm still learning about the system when I have free time, and I'm assuming that many of you are as well if you're looking up this video. I'd love to know what you think. Personally, I don't like the fact that this thing down here takes up like, what is this? 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Takes up about 10 to 15% of my 1080p desktop just to show the browser URL and a big fab icon over there. Okay. So, this sort of full featured thing is not my full screen thing is not my cup of tea just yet. I'd like to see what others think about it, and I've posted this video to show my inexperience with Windows 8 thus far, my interest in it, my criticisms of it. Having just come back from the Microsoft MVP Global Summit, I can tell you nothing about what happened there really, except that the people that greeted me and who were part of those events in that summit were very friendly, some of the friendliest people in the world you'll ever meet, some of the more knowledgeable people in the world you'll ever meet as far as computers are concerned. But I do have my reservations about this operating system still. And I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching this video. Go ahead and use the comments box. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and dislike it. Big thumbs down on the video. And also check out windows8forums.com for a more in-depth discussion. Accounts are free. We're not an official Microsoft website, but we have Microsoft Most Valuable Professional members on there, myself included. We also have people that have been in IT for years, people that have used Windows7forums.com for ages. And we are part of the Microsoft Partner Program. So we'd love to see you on the site. Thanks a lot for taking a little bit of a look at Windows 8, even though you may not have installed it yet. You may want to hold off on that upgrade for sure. A clean install would not be out of the question for so long as you are completely comfortable with losing all of your data. That is just how it works with beta software.